And this month we've actually been targeting, we've kind of been focusing on issues related to marginalization and systemic oppression of certain groups, and also focusing on allyship as well. And in doing that, we have been collecting donations for this really great Native organization based out of northern Minnesota called Honor the Earth, or western Minnesota? Northern Minnesota, called Honor the Earth. So they are this, in the last kind of 20 years of their organization being active, they've been able to re-grant over $200 million to $2 million to over 200 Native communities facing both environmental and political problems. So we do have a donation box up there. Overall, they work to offer financial and organizational support to Native communities. So it's a really great organization. So if you guys are interested in donating, we'd really appreciate it. And in addition to that too, we are also selling some fun little merchandise. We got stickers, we got buttons, and those profits will also be donated to Honor the Earth as well. So if you guys are interested, we have some of that stuff up there, as well as little pamphlets that speak a little more to Honor the Earth, and pamphlets about our organization, and then the email list that I mentioned. And then kind of looking at the future, next week we will be hosting our next meeting. It'll be at 7 p.m. in CPS room 210, and during that meeting we're actually going to be inviting a lot of community members, students, and faculty members if they are interested in. So I don't know if a lot of you saw the Spark post about calling for the resignation of the admissions, or the chancellor and the provost here on campus, but kind of in support of that, and also in support of our community partners also calling for that resignation. We thought it would be helpful to film students, faculty, and community members making statements, either kind of talking about how they feel that these cuts are going to be harming both the community and the culture of Stevens Point, both on campus and off of campus, as well as just calling for the resignation of the chancellor and the provost, kind of given the way that these cuts have been handled. And then also, one other thing we have coming up on the 11th, on Tuesday, December 11th, at 7 p.m., we will be hosting a panel discussion with some groups on campus, such as the Multicultural Resource Center, the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center, and other organizations like that, talking about some issues they face, as well as their importance here on campus, and how to be an ally. So if you guys are interested in coming to that, it will be on the 11th at 7. All of the organizations who are involved are still being decided, as well as the location of the event. But if you follow us on Facebook or get added to our email list, we will be kind of posting about that event in the next couple days. So, yeah.
All good information. Also, because I'm obligated to do this, my editor will get mad at me if I don't, and he sent someone down here with these books. This lecture series is the continuation of the lecture series from last year, which became this book. If you don't have a copy of it, you can get a copy tonight for $5 from that gentleman back there. So if what happens to you tonight doesn't turn you off from philosophy completely, you are welcome to grab a copy on your way out. And if you find that to be, I'll sign it if you find that to be worth your $5. So let me say to you something about tonight's lecture before we get started. The previous lectures in this series have been an attempt to sort of reframe the way we think about and interpret our existence, sort of environmentally oriented toward a better future. And prior to tonight, those 6 lectures and the previous 4 have really been trying to create the intellectual space for tonight's lecture. So there's going to be a pretty quick and dirty and very seemingly haphazard review of the history of the issue of otherness. And I say that to you to say this to you. This issue, more than any other, probably shaped me as a young philosopher. It was the one philosophical problem that I found myself coming back to all the time as an undergrad. I wrote about it inappropriately in classes where it didn't fit the assignment because it was something that really interested me. And I was working with philosophers I didn't really understand, and even today probably still don't, because they are in a different plane of existence. But we're going to give it the old college try tonight. And I say that to you because this is really weird language, which is probably why it appealed to me when I was younger. But you just pay attention so I don't lose you. If I lose you, throw a hand up. Tell me to back up a sentence or three. Ask a question. Don't wait till the end, because if you do, it's going to get a little messy. I also want to say that the theme for tonight, the theme of this lecture series, moral monstrosity, and monstrosity in general is a philosophical problem I've often found myself fascinated by, and not just because I like horror films, but because, or creepy books, but because I think monsters are fascinating historically as well. And tonight, this lecture, I've been waiting since May at this point to do tonight's lecture. One, because I love the topic, but two, because we're going to talk about Frankenstein. And I don't know if you know this or not, but this is the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein. Not tonight specifically, January 1, 1818, Mary Shelley published Frankenstein. So this year has been the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein, and our campus did virtually nothing, in fact, I think nothing at all to mark the passing of this fantastic book. So this is my attempt to redress that failing on behalf of UWSP. So you're going to get a little Frankenstein, but to get to Frankenstein, we got to go through Hegel. So bear with me. If you don't know what that means, then you're in better shape than most of my previous students who know exactly what that means. All right, so I subtitled tonight's lecture, you probably got it, as Disconnection and Otherness. It's subtitled A Critique of the Natural Self. Here we have come to the culmination of our interrogation of the essence of being, viewed through the mirror provided by monstrosity. The stranger, the creature, the thing, and finally the other. Questions about otherness are integral not only to understanding the nature of another being's existence, but also our own. To be sure, strangers and creatures and things are all in their own way other than we are. That is, it is easy to delineate an I-them epistemology, though as we have seen in previous lectures and discussions, the metaphysics is a little more difficult to parse out in a similar fashion. And the ontology remains an open question. The otherness captured by these existences is not what we are after in this analysis. In fact, I would argue that what we are after here is categorically different than the otherness housed in those previous ideas. I think wrestling with those ideas is necessary to open the space essential to fully appreciate immense difficulty that comes from encountering the other as other. Philosophers in the modern period, beginning canonically with Descartes, have been concerned with the nature of, indeed establishing the existence of, a comparable existence to our own. Here, the our is meant to be interpreted individually as my existence, an existence that only I have direct access to. This is the critical insight encapsulated by Descartes' famous dictum, cogito ergo sum. Descartes believed, at the conclusion of his first meditation, that he had solved the puzzle of his own existence, because if I am thinking, then I must exist, even if I cannot be certain of any of the aspects of that existence. The problem that emerges here is not whether Descartes is onto something. Surely his conclusion is profound. But the development of that idea from meditation 1 to meditation 2, where I think, therefore I am, loses its logical argumentative structure and becomes I think I am, an axiomatic principle. Descartes seems satisfied with having discovered the ground of his own existence. And he moves happily on to figuring out how to escape the solipsism of his deduction and provides a sound argument for the existence of others. This then is the issue, or at least part of the issue, that must be considered in the context of otherness. Namely, if I can know that I exist, even if I am completely uncertain about the content of that existence, I can still confidently move forward to otherness. But Descartes has not fully unraveled the problem of his own existence because he does not know what he is. And rather than figuring this out as a necessary condition for properly understanding otherness, Descartes merely asserts that based on the conclusions of the first meditation, his being is a re cogiton, a thinking thing. Descartes' argument will establish throughout the Enlightenment and through to contemporary philosophy a need to wrestle with the I, capital I, and determine the content of the self. For instance, John Locke will argue that continuity of consciousness is the essential element of the self, and so understood, he develops his ideas of knowledge, experience, reflection, and identity accordingly. David Hume will argue the enigma of the self is nothing more than a bundle of perceptions like links in a chain that create a cohesive identity through time. Immanuel Kant will postulate when one is conscious of oneself as subject, one has a bare consciousness of self in which nothing manifold is given. That's a fancy way of saying that Kant believes we cannot actually know anything about the self that is not immediately apprehensible in self-awareness. That is, I exist. Descartes' cogito and the struggles of the Enlightenment thinkers to wrest from it some idea of the self will give way to post-Enlightenment phenomenology and more refined attempts to understand the self, which is again a necessary condition for understanding otherness. Johann Fichte begins his analysis of I-hood by simply asking us, and I want you to do this for just a moment. Fichte asks us to think the I and observe what happens. So put yourself in a position of I think, and then see what happens when you try to think about the I that thinks. Okay, you there? I see smoke starting to fill the room. Stop thinking now. Right? But more precisely, to observe the point of view one assumes in undertaking self-reflection. What exactly are you reflecting on? In determining otherness, the question becomes, in determining the scope of the thing reflected upon, what are its limits? Descartes stops short of this and settles for the uninspired thinking thing. But Fichte intends those limits to be simultaneously an object of our reflection and an action on our part. By reflecting on our limits, we must assume the perspective of being inside and looking out. Imagine looking out a window and seeing simultaneously the world outside, your own reflection, and the room behind you. There is definitely an outside world. It is a world of experience and sensation. The outside world, according to Locke, provides the sensations that give our minds something to think about, to reflect upon, and by doing so, for Fichte, enables us to realize the limits of our being. The window is simultaneously an opening in an existence that also functions as a mirror. That is, by looking through myself, I am able to understand my place in the world, or more properly, my relationship to it.